Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're taking a closer look at a really tragic event.
Yeah, the Air India flight AI-171 crash on June 12th.
Exactly. And what we want to do today is really sift through the information we have, the sources you've shared with us,
Right, to understand what happened, the aftermath, the investigation.
and the bigger picture, really. The safety implications for everyone who flies. So get this. Just 2 minutes after takeoff, the flight sends out a mayday. That's where this whole tragedy begins.
A really chilling start.
Okay,
Yeah.
let's unpack this. So the flight was Air India AI-171.
A Boeing 7878 Dreamliner, registration VT-ANB.
It had just taken off from Ahmedabad Airport, runway 23, around 1:39 p.m. local time.
Heading to London Gatwick.
Ah.
On board, 242 people. That's 230 passengers and 12 crew.
And then, almost immediately, distress.
Yeah, at about 1:41 p.m., so literally 2 minutes in the air. The pilots radioed that mayday to ATC.
And the plane started descending rapidly.
Very rapidly. It lost altitude from about 625 feet, dropping at 475 feet per minute. That's steep.
Wow. And shortly after that call, silence.
ATC lost contact. The aircraft just stopped transmitting signals.
The crash itself,
Yeah.
just devastating. It hit a doctor's hostel.
Yeah, at BJ Medical College in Meghananagar, just past the runway.
And witnesses reported explosions, huge plumes of smoke.
Thick black smoke, visible for kilometers, apparently. Just awful.
The devastation on the ground sounds immense, too.
It was. Dozens killed on the ground, students, interns, staff. Buildings heavily damaged.
And the numbers. What are the official figures now?
Well, tragically, 241 fatalities out of the 242 people on the plane.
Just one survivor from the aircraft.
We'll get to that. Plus, at least 39 fatalities on the ground and over 60 injured there, too.
So the death toll is?
Over 280 deaths and around 61 injured overall. It's just a staggering loss.
In that immediate chaos, the search and rescue must have been frantic.
Absolutely. Reports say it was swift, around 150 CRPF personnel mobilized.
That's the Central Reserve Police Force.
Right. Including their Rapid Action Force and troops from Ganayanagar, plus 3 NDRF teams.
National Disaster Response Force. About 90 personnel.
Exactly. And local fire crews battling the fires, injured, rushed to civil hospital. They started collecting DNA samples quickly, too, for identification.
A massive operation.
Yeah, and the airport itself had to shut down flight operations for a while.
Understandable. Though they reopened runway 23 later that evening.
That's right, once the immediate scene was somewhat contained.
Now, amidst all this, you mentioned the one survivor from the plane. That's incredible.
It really is. Vishwash Kumar Ramesh, a British national.
He was in seat 11A, apparently.
Correct. And he managed to walk away through an emergency exit with only minor injuries. Just miraculous.
And the follow-up story is quite poignant, too.
Very much so. He was released from hospital on June 17th. And then, just imagine, he carried his own brother's coffin at a funeral in Diu.
Oh, heartbreaking. Such a contrast.
And of course, there were widespread expressions of grief, Air India, PM Modi, King Charles III, lots of public condolences.
So, once the immediate crisis response was underway, attention obviously turned to why. What were the first clues investigators seized on?
Well, one really critical observation noted by former pilots and others was the landing gear.
What about it?
It remained extended during the ascent. It never retracted.
Which would increase drag, right? Make it harder to climb.
Exactly. But it's more than just drag. Its staying down points to a potentially significant issue right after takeoff. Either a major system failure preventing retraction or, perhaps something distracting the pilots at that critical moment. It immediately tells you the plane wasn't performing normally.
Okay, so that's a big visual clue. What about suspected mechanical failures? What were people seeing or hearing?
Witnesses and the initial look at the situation pointed towards a possible dual-engine failure.
Both engines. How could that happen?
Could be internal malfunction or maybe severe bird strikes right after takeoff. That's always a possibility near airports.
And there was another technical sign, wasn't there? Something about emergency power.
Yes, crucially, the evidence shows the Boeing's Ram air turbine, the RAT, it was deployed.
Explain the RAT for us.
It's basically a small emergency propeller that drops down to generate essential power if both engines fail. It's the aircraft's last resort for electricity and hydraulic pressure.
So its deployment is a really strong indicator.
A very strong indicator of a total loss of primary power from the engines. It narrows the focus significantly towards a catastrophic power failure event.
Right, that makes sense. Now, what about the plane itself? Its maintenance history? There were some questions there, weren't there?
There were. Some sources mentioned the aircraft had recently been through a major refurbishment.
Which naturally raises questions, right?
Mm-hmm.
Could something have gone wrong during that work?
Exactly. It prompted early suspicion about potential engineering faults.
But Air India pushed back on that.
They did. They stated the aircraft was, quote, well-maintained. They pointed out the right engine was actually newly installed in March 2025.
Very recently.
Yes. And the left engine had been serviced back in 2023.
Okay, so conflicting signals there. Refurbishment potentially causing issues versus the airline saying it was well-maintained with recent engine work. How do investigators sort that out?
That's where the black boxes are absolutely vital.
The flight data recorder and cockpit voice recorder.
Correct. The FDR and CVR both were recovered from the wreckage.
But they were damaged.
Yes. Sources say heat damaged, but they're built tough. They're being transferred now under AAIB oversight for analysis.
The AAIB being India's Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau.
That's right. The data from those recorders, aircraft parameters, system status, sounds, and voices from the cockpit, that's what will hopefully provide the definitive answers.
Well, that sounds like a huge job. Who's actually on the investigation team?
It's a pretty extensive joint effort. You've got India's AAIB, of course, and the DGCA, that's the Directorate General of Civil Aviation.
India's main regulator.
Yep. Then engineers from Boeing, naturally, and GE Aerospace, since they made the engines.
And international help, too.
Yes. The U.S. NTSB, the National Transportation Safety Board, and UK safety authorities are also involved, bringing in global expertise.
With all those players, what kind of timeline are we looking at for findings? When can we expect reports?
Well, the standard international practice following ICAO norms.
The International Civil Aviation Organization.
Right. They mandate a preliminary report within 30 days. So we should see something around July 12th.
And the final detailed report.
That usually takes much longer. The target is within 12 months. So by June 2026, that report should lay out the probable cause.
Okay. Now, separate from the crash investigation itself, what about the immediate regulatory response? What did the DGCA do?
They acted quickly. The DGCA launched what's being called an inspection blitz.
On with planes.
They grounded and started inspecting Air India's Boeing 787 and 777 fleets, the wide-body aircraft.
Have they cleared any yet?
As of the latest reports, yes. They've cleared 26 out of Air India's 33 Boeing 787s to fly again.
Then Air India itself took action.
They did. They proactively paused about 15% of their international wide-body flights until mid-July.
To conduct their own safety checks.
Seems so. It suggests they're taking this extremely seriously internally as well.
Has anything else come up, like prior incidents or warnings that are now being looked at again?
Yes, and this could be really significant. Investigators are apparently re-examining a takeoff incident from 2020 involving another Air India 787 at London Gatwick.
Looking for potential similarities or patterns.
Exactly. And then there's this other layer, litigation notes.
What's that about?
Well, 2 former Air India employees reportedly sent a letter to the Prime Minister, Narendra Modi.
Alleging what?
Alleging that previous complaints they had made about system flaws in the Dreamliner fleet were ignored by the airline.
Wow, okay, that adds a whole different dimension. Potential organizational negligence.
Precisely. It complicates things significantly, moving beyond just a potential technical failure or pilot error to questions about the airline's safety culture and response to internal warnings.
That's a serious allegation. So what's been the wider impact of all this beyond the airline and regulators?
Well, obviously, the flight cancellations that 15% cut Air India made impacted passengers, requiring rebooking and reruns.
And politically.
Diplomatically.
A lot of reaction, as you'd expect. Condolences and statements from leaders in India, the UK, other countries. And locally, the Gujarat government has announced plans for a memorial at the crash site.
To honor the victims.
Yes. It's an event with really deep, widespread repercussions.
Putting this into historical context, how significant is this crash?
Hugely significant, unfortunately. If we look at the bigger picture, this is actually the first fatal crash involving a Boeing 787 Dreamliner anywhere in the world since it entered service.
The very first. That's major.
It is. And for India, it's the deadliest air disaster in 3 decades.
Worse than
the Indian Airlines Flight 113 crash back in 1988, which also happened near Ahmedabad. So this really stands out historically. So we have all these pieces, the engine failure signs, the RET activation, the landing gear issue, the pilot actions in the Mayday call, the possibility of bird strikes, the maintenance questions, the whistleblower letter. Where does this leave us on the cause? Is it looking like human error, a technical fault, or, that complex mix?
It's almost always a complex mix, isn't it? The initial clues, the RAT, the gear, strongly point towards a major technical failure, likely involving engine power loss.
But the trigger is still unclear.
Right. What initiated the failure? And how did the crew respond in those critical seconds? Was there distraction, maybe from bird strikes that also damaged the engines? Or was it a sudden, unrecoverable power loss?
So untangling that sequence and the human factors involved is key.
Absolutely. Accident investigations are rarely about finding one single smoking gun. It's usually a chain of events, technical and human, that lead to tragedy.
Given everything, especially those whistleblower claims, what broader lessons might come out of this for aviation safety?
Well, this could genuinely reshape some safety norms. There will undoubtedly be calls for reviews, everything from basic checklist adherence to the big oversight mechanisms.
And the whistleblower aspect adds pressure there.
Tremendous pressure. If those allegations about ignored warnings prove true, it raises fundamental questions about safety culture, not just at one airline, but potentially across the industry. How are internal warnings handled? Is there enough transparency and accountability?
So it's not just about fixing a part, it's about fixing potential systemic issues.
Potentially, yes. It could lead to strengthening how safety concerns are reported and acted upon globally, ensuring that lessons are learned not just after a crash, but before one happens.
This Air India flight AI-171 crash, it's clearly a devastating event with far-reaching consequences, felt deeply in India and globally.
Absolutely. That image of the sole survivor amidst such loss, it really underscores the tragedy.
And it throws up urgent questions about maintenance, procedures, checks and balances.
Within airlines, within regulatory bodies.
So, as the investigation moves forward, what are the key things we should be watching for?
Definitely the analysis of those black boxes, the FDR and CVR data, will be crucial.
The preliminary report from the DGCA due around mid-July.
Yes. And the findings from that review of the 2020 Gatwick incident are their parallels.
Any potential regulatory actions that might follow.
That too. And critically, any conclusions about Air India's maintenance culture and how those alleged prior warnings were handled, that could be explosive.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what does this specific terrible incident tell you, the listener, about